أهلا وسهلا فيكم ببيت مستقبل، المؤسسة اللي أردناها منذ البدء مساحة حوار وتبادل أفكار واستشراق المستقبل. بيت المستقبل عم بيحاول يقوم بدوره إملاء فراغ معين على الساحة الفكرية اللبنانية، وعقدنا مجموعة من الندوات والمؤتمرات حول القضايا المعاصرة، حاولنا نجمع نخب حتى نفكر كلنا مع بعضنا البعض حول المستقبل وحول المشاكل المعاصرة اللي عم تعترضنا. نحن اليوم عم نعيش بقرية كونية، قرية كونية، ما بعتقد في بقى فوارق فيها، العالم كله متضامن مع بعضه البعض، العالم متداخل مع بعضه البعض. من هون كان اهتمامنا بالانتخابات الأمريكية اللي نعرف تماما شو دور أمريكا في العالم ككل وبما يعنينا نحن هون في الشرق الأوسط. موضوع الانتخابات الأمريكية لها تأثير مباشر على مجريات الأمور وتأثير مباشر على تطور الأوضاع في المنطقة. فمن هون اهتمامنا بهذه الانتخابات، خاصة وأنه في بيت المستقبل وبكل المناسبات، وكان هذا حتى بافتتاح المؤسسة كنا دايما نطالب بالشراكة، الشراكة المتوازنة المتكافئة الحرة بين كل المكونات. ولذلك اهتمامنا اليوم أكثر وأكثر بما يحصل بالشرق الأوسط والتضامن والتداخل. ومن هالمنطلق هذا كان فيها الندوة المتخصصة حول موضوع الانتخابات الأمريكية. نحن بننظر لها الانتخابات من باب محاولة البحث بموضوع الشراكة، والشراكة بدنا إياها شراكة بناءة متكافئة، بدنا إياها بارتنرشيب وليس باترناليزم. يعني بارتنرشيب يعني يكون في تعاون وليس يكون في بطريقة فوقية، بطريقة متكافئة. ومن هون نظرتنا أو اهتمام بيت المستقبل بكل هالمواضيع. ما استوقفنا بموضوع الانتخابات الأمريكية، ما استوقفنا بهالانتخابات هو المناظرات أو الخطاب الانتخابي. والخطاب الانتخابي اللي هو مفاجأة لكل الرأي العام، بدءا بالرأي العام الأمريكي وبالرأي العام العالمي. يعني المستوى الهابط متدني غير مسبوق بالخطاب السياسي الأمريكي. نحن بنتساءل أين النخب الأمريكية؟ أين هي النخب؟ أين هي الجامعات المرموقة، الجامعات الكبيرة الأمريكية؟ يعني كيف تفاعلها مع هذا المستوى الهابط من الخطاب السياسي في المعركة الانتخابية؟ أين تبادل الأفكار؟ أين المشاريع المستقبلية؟ أين النظرة للمجتمع ومواكبة الحداثة؟ فكان في خيبة أمل من هذا الأمر. فهذا موضوع أكيد يبقى بالتداول بالنسبة لها الندوة هيدي. واللي كذلك أمر بيلفتنا أكثر وأكثر هو رديف الدولة الأخرى العظمى الأخرى هي روسيا. كمان هالسلوك الروسي، العسكري الروسي خاصة مؤخرا في حلب، التصرف اللي يفوق كل تصور وأدى إلى كل هالمآسي والمناحات والتهديد، القتل والتدمير، كذلك أمر وكأنه عم بلاقي من ناحية أخرى هالمنحى اللي أخذته الانتخابات الرئاسية الأمريكانية. فهل يا ترى هذا هو المستقبل؟ هل هو على صورة هذا الصراع أو هذا السلوك ما بين أمريكا وبين روسيا؟ هذا هو اللي بيقلقنا، أكيد بيقلق العالم كله، ولا مجال لدفع باتجاه الاستقرار والسلام العالمي إلا بإعادة نظر بهذا المنحى وإعادة تصحيح المسار، لا سيما على صعيد الدولتين الكبريتين اللي عم تتحكم بمصير العالم. فهذا هو موضوعنا اليوم. بتأمل أنه هالأبحاث اللي رح تجري اليوم تكون هي أجوبة، وتكون هي كذلك أمر تصور أو أفكار ممكن ننطلق منها لبحث معمق أو لاستشراق المستقبل. قبل ما أعطي الكلام للسيد نيل اللي هو ممثل كونراد أدناور شتيفتونغ، بحب أشكركم كلكم اللي شاركتونا بهالندوة. في يعني ما رح سمي حتى ما انسى أحد، بس كلكم أحباء إلنا لبيت المستقبل وأصدقاء بيت المستقبل، بنرحب فيكم. بدي أشكر كونراد أدناور شتيفتونغ مؤسسة كونراد أدناور على التعاون الدايم نحن وياها. صار منظمين مجموعة ندوات نحن وكونراد أدناور، وفي احنا مسرورين لهالعلاقة، ونتأمل أنه كمان تتطور أكثر وأكثر، يكون في تبادل الأفكار بين الشرق والغرب، وتكون هذا مدخل لمزيد من الأبحاث واستشراق المستقبل، ونقدر نقدم اقتراحات لحل بعض المشكلات، على الأقل نساهم بإيجاد الحلول للمشكلات المعاصرة اللي عم تواجهنا. بدي أشكر كذلك أمر المشاركين بهالندوة، في السيد شارل دان اللي حضر من أمريكا بظروف صعبة، بنرحب فيه بهالمناسبة هذه اللي شارك بالندوة. دكتور محمد الرميحي رح يكون معنا على سكايب من الكويت. في السفير رياد طبارة عنده إشكال صغير رح يوصل. الدكتور سجاد جياد، ودكتور خالد أويس، وكذلك أمر مدير الندوة الصديق موفق حرب. فمن نرحب فيهم كلهم، ونتأمل أنه تكون هالندوة هيدي تؤدي غرضها. نحن من هلأ لآخر السنة في عنا مجموعة ندوات، لا سيما ندوتين نعلن عنهم اليوم. في ندوة حول accountability and transparency، الشفافية والمحاسبة، تعقد في الشهر القادم. وكذلك أمر ندوة أخرى عن مستقبل سوريا على ضوء المستجدات الأخيرة في هذا البلد. فهذه هي بعض الندوات اللي هلأ نحن بصدد تحضيرها من هلأ لآخر السنة، وتحضيرا للمؤتمر العالمي الدولي اللي السنوي اللي بنعقده في بيت مستقبل بمنتصف أيار في 15 أيار. فسنعلن عن العنوان بوقت قريب جدا، وشكرا.
Dear President Gemayel, distinguished speakers, dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of Maison du Futur and Konrad Adenauer Foundation to this conference here at the conference center of Maison du Futur in Big Fire. This event, the conference, is one academic event in a row of conferences that we did together with Maison du Futur throughout this year. To mention only a few, we had a very big conference in May on the Sykes-Picot Agreement. We discussed the Syrian civil war in the beginning of this year, and we had a comprehensive discussion and conference in regard to the refugee crisis. I think I do not need to highlight the relevance and the importance of today's topic, the upcoming presidential elections in the US and what this would mean for the Middle East, particularly Lebanon, Syria and Iraq. I'm happy, and I would like to thank as well Charles Dunne, who prepared the policy paper that we published together with Maison de Futur and who will give the first presentation, and our other speakers beside Washington, who we have here from Baghdad and Berlin, and of course our participants here from Beirut. Thank you, Mr. Muafak, that you volunteered to lead us through the discussion and moderate this panel. With these words, I would like to hand over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mouhamed Harib. I'm a journalist, and I will be the moderator today of the panel. My job today is to make sure all the panelists are right on time. They would not exceed their allocated time. So I will be policing the setting. Somehow I will try to intervene and ask a couple of questions. Let's begin with Charles Dunne. He is the non-scholar resident at the Middle East Institute. Formerly, he served in the US government in a variety of capacities. He served at the State Department. I think the last time I saw him was at the White House. So if he tries to tell you he doesn't know, he does know a lot of things. So after he gives his presentation about the policy paper, about the subject of today's panel, the panelists, each one of them will have a 5 minutes intervention, and then we take a coffee break, we'll reconvene again, we'll have a discussion among ourselves, and then we open the floor for Q&As. So please join me in welcoming Charles, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'd first like to thank President Jumail for his kind opening remarks, and to the Maison de Futur for hosting this event in this very beautiful space. And of course to Nils and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for putting together and hosting this terrific conference in the first place. It's great to be invited to share my thoughts on the upcoming US presidential election with this very distinguished group that we have here today. And I do have some thoughts. I've been thinking about this quite a bit. It's hard to avoid. The US presidential election in 2016 is shaping up to be highly consequential. This is true not only for America, but for many other important relationships in the world, and especially the Middle East and its relationship with the United States. Among the issues on the table are international trade deals, good or bad, the nature and extent of the use of military, US military force overseas, immigration, and religious tests for people entering the United States or wishing to remain in the United States. These are just a few of them, plenty of others out there on the table. Now, on the Middle East, also elsewhere, a couple of stark choices have been presented by the candidates. Let me summarize these briefly. Republican nominee Donald J. Trump has alternatively said both Iraq was a mistake, he never would have gone in there, he called it a disaster. But then he says he's going to go into Iraq in order to defeat Daesh or ISIS. He has openly disagreed with his running mate, Mike Pence. Most recently on Syria, Pence believes that more must be done to stem the Syrian refugee flows and stop Assad's war on his own people. At the last debate, Trump simply said, no, haven't even talked to him about it. So that's kind of discordant. Trump believes that Assad's main purpose is not taking over Aleppo or anything. His main purpose is to fight ISIS. And for that, he's something of a US ally in the war on terrorism. He denigrated the US military and claimed that he knows more about ISIS than his generals. But nevertheless, he asked them to come up with a plan to rapidly destroy the group. He claims that he has his own secret plan to do so and would compare the two before making his own decision. But to give you seriously a sense of Trump's knowledge of the region, in the last debate, he claimed that Aleppo had already been overrun by the Syrian forces, which is obviously not true. Previously, he claimed that ISIS was controlling Libyan oil fields and making millions of them. Also untrue. Trump has not commented on the Middle East peace process, really in any great detail beyond expressing strong support for Israel. He's expressed admiration for powerful leaders like Vladimir Putin and even Saddam Hussein. He's rejected a number of long-standing policies and even threatens to downgrade our relations with NATO unless they, I believe, as he puts it, pay up. Trump's limited knowledge and erratic behavior have created deep concern in the Washington foreign policy community and certainly many, many other places in the world. Now, Hillary Clinton, by contrast, has long experience in public policy and in diplomacy as a First Lady, as a U.S. Senator from New York, and as Secretary of State. Now, her policies could be expected to hew closely to the traditional centrist positions, such as support for the Middle East peace process and a strong U.S. national defense. She would not only be more reassuring in relationships with allies, but also in her approach to the Middle East. She could be expected, as I say, to try to reinvigorate the Middle East peace process, following in the footsteps of her husband, who devoted really amazingly, an amazingly large number of hours in his personal time in his presidency to negotiations. She could also be expected to take a harder line on Syrian and Russian transgressions in Syria, and would be unlikely to continue endless rounds of negotiations, as John Kerry has done, to bring about ceasefires that seem to fall apart within days or at most a couple of weeks. In the debate aired on October 9th, she did call for the establishment of safe zones within Syria to help stop Assad's war on his own people. But she might also back even more extensive intervention, carefully, as she did in debates when she was Secretary of State within the administration. Now, this is actually a new policy direction that's currently being discussed at various high levels of the U.S. administration and the military. Now, while that would be unlikely to get approval during the last months of the Obama administration, President Clinton might look at it differently. I want to make here clear a couple of things. First, I am a Republican, I confess. In this election, I have provided advice to the campaigns of Carly Fiorina and Marco Rubio. Second, I am against Trump, as you might be able to tell. I'm a member of a group called R4C16, which of course stands for Republicans for Clinton in 2016. We have a strong foreign policy focus in this group. I just wanted to let you know all this. You can understand where I'm coming from when I make these remarks, and you can evaluate them accordingly. Let me make three primary points here today, drawing from the paper I wrote for this very important conference. I will follow with policy recommendations for the next president. First, on Lebanon, neither of the two candidates has taken a stance on the future of the republic or its current presidential impasse, but they should. Given the possibility of another major war between Hezbollah and Israel, which has been talked quite a bit about in Washington Middle East policy think tanks, this is a real and an important issue. It's a serious issue for the United States and the region. In addition, Hezbollah's role in the Syria conflict has important repercussions, not only within Syria, obviously, but also within Lebanon and other regional states. So Hezbollah obviously possesses significant military capabilities which it can use effectively in some cases. This, in my view, shapes Lebanon into something of an under-recognized regional power. Second, on Iraq, neither candidate has shown an appetite to become more aggressively involved in this country's conflicts, instead of simply confine themselves to battling each other on the origins of the war and who's at fault. Now, Trump says he was always against the 2003 coalition invasion, which is false and has been completely debunked by various news organizations. Clinton voted for it, of course, in her Senate campaign, and now says it was a big mistake. She has vowed never to send more troops into Iraq, possibly ignoring the fact that there are already 5,000 troops there, helping to train and organize the Iraqi forces. Clinton has spoken of building a strong alliance with the Kurdish Peshmerga and providing them better arms and training. But she's not made a major commitment to helping to solve the internal political and ethnic divisions that continue to divide this country and continue to fuel internal instability. Now, failure to do this last part by either one of the candidates will only lead to persistent and destabilizing conflicts. Neither at this point appears to have a comprehensive strategy. 5 more minutes. Well, let me just say about all of this. They've taken a lot of positions. They're all moving targets, and they will change again during this campaign, perhaps, and perhaps they will certainly change when either one of these people becomes president. Let me just go straight to the recommendations that I have, and these are kind of elaborations on what you'll find in the paper. First, the United States must articulate an informed regional strategy to address the interlocking crises in which this part of the world is enmeshed. These include pressing economic reform and marshaling financial resources to assist governments who are willing to embrace open markets and fair regulation. It also includes helpful diplomatic assistance with tough political problems, such as Lebanon's presidential crisis, and also assisting countries trying to make fundamental political change. Tunisia here is a prime example, which went from a dictatorship under Ben Ali to something that Freedom House today characterizes as a free electoral democracy. Now, this would necessarily include articulating a more comprehensive regional military strategy, including whether, how, and to what extent the United States would be willing to intervene militarily. Second, as part of this strategy, the United States must keep Iran on a tight leash as far as the nuclear deal goes. Clinton is strongly in favor of it, while Trump wants to abolish it. But if the deal works to keep Iran away from a nuclear weapon, it will have been worth it. Still, no president should let the atrocious human rights abuses of the Iranian regime slip just to protect the nuclear deal. It should highlight Iran's policies and punish them for the executions, the torture, the disappearances into prison, and so on. Third, the United States must advance a broad agenda of robust human rights and democracy promotion. Now, I believe and have often said that security and stability depends on people's ability to express themselves and to push for political change. I do believe there's a second wave of uprisings coming in this region along the lines of the Arab Spring. I don't know where, I don't know when, but I think it will come because there's so much pent-up political demand for it. And this will come despite the best efforts of authoritarians to repress their people. Fourth, the Arab-Israeli conflict must be addressed in a serious and sustained way. This generations-long confrontation seems like a lost cause today. Bill Clinton's so-called parameters, which he issued very late in his second term, provide a good foundation for a final status agreement. And the president, whoever it is, should assess these parameters very deeply. Let me conclude there simply by saying that this region has an awful lot of problems on its plate. They have to be dealt with in an informed and serious way. It's not enough, for example, to say we're simply going to bomb the heck out of ISIS as Trump has. There are many issues that the next American president will have to address across the board. With the bitter turn of events that the campaign has taken in the last week, with its focus on, shall we say, issues other than immigration and tax reform and serious issues that the campaign should be addressing. With all this bitterness, I doubt that we're going to get much more new insight into what the candidates think and feel about the region. But this will remain certainly very critically important for the next president to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. Now, begin with our panelists with us today here. Let's go to Kuwait and ask Dr. Mouhamed Al-Rumaihi, prominent political writer, to join us from Kuwait via Skype. I guarantee you a good content because Dr. Rumaihi is well known and he's very thoughtful. However, the internet connection I do not guarantee. So bear with us. If we lose it, we'll try to reconnect again. Dr. Rumaihi, can you hear me? Okay, sure. Meanwhile, you have 1 minute. If anything you want to say before, let's take advantage of the time that I have right now before Mouhamed is connected. Do you want to say anything, Charles? Let me challenge you since we are waiting. What can
personally believe in the importance of sticking to our guns on human rights and democratization. Okay, that's something the last president, President Obama, paid a lot of lip service to. But then when the going got tough, he backed away. And Konrad Adenauer should know about this too, because I was working in Freedom House in the time, and both of our organizations were thrown out of the country. And I personally was convicted of a felony in association with my work on democratization there. So having a consistent plan to address these issues with hostile governments is a good thing.
Dr. Rumaihi?
نعم أسمعكم بوضوح.
اتفضل دكتور رميحي. معك 5 دقائق. تفضل.
يعني أنا مع الأسف فاتني أن أسمع التقديم، ولكن إذا كان الموضوع هو الانتخابات الأمريكية فإن لدي بعض النقاط السريعة.
نعم هيدا هو الموضوع
على حضراتكم.
نعم.
أولا يعني أراد السيد ترامب أدار حملة كلاسيكية يمكن بعد ذلك أن تدرس في الجامعات تحت عنوان كيف تقوم بإدارة حملة فاشلة في الرئاسة الأمريكية. فالكثير من الموضوعات التي طرحها في حقيقة الأمر هي موضوعات مع الأسف لا تمت إلى عصرنا الحالي بصلة. الموضوع الثاني أن خروج ظاهرة ترامب في الانتخابات الأخيرة هو بسبب جزئي لفشل سياسات السيد أوباما، خاصة في الشؤون الخارجية وفي مكانين على وجه التحديد. المكان الأول هو الاتفاق الإيراني الدولي، وهو اتفاق رغم محاولة ترويجه إلا أنه فاته نقطة مهمة جدا، بأن هذا العصر في هذا العالم الذي نعيش لا يوجد مكان للحكومات الدينية. هذا أمر من المهم أن يتضح إلى المراقبين، لأن الحكومات الدينية هي حكومات مؤدلجة بشدة وبعيدة عن العصر الحديث. وقد أفرزت هذه الحكومة الإيرانية جزئيا، لا أقول كليا ولكن جزئيا، ردود الفعل المتشنجة من بعض العرب على شاكلة داعش وأمثالها. في المكان الثاني الذي فشل فيه السيد أوباما هو سوريا، ليس فقط بسبب الخسارة الهائلة في الأرواح وفي المدن، ولكن أيضا بسبب إتاحة الفرصة لدخول الاتحاد الروسي على هذه المنطقة بقوة كبيرة. ويبدو أن هذا الدخول يحقق مجموعة من المصالح للاتحاد الروسي بالاتفاق مع قوى إقليمية ومنها طبعا إيران. هذه المصالح تحقق بدليل رضوخ النظام التركي للمطالب الروسية، وكما نعلم أيضا محاولة الالتفاف الروسي في مناطق مختلفة تحت توجهات إما التنسيق في موضوع الطاقة أو الحفاظ على الاستقرار. فإذا أنا من الناس الذين يعتقدون بأن الولايات المتحدة لها دور كبير وسوف يظل لها دور كبير، ولكن انسحابها من منطقة الشرق الأوسط تسبب في أضرار كبرى. هي في حقيقة الأمر لم على الأقل هذه الإدارة الحالية لم تتعرف على الواقع كما هو، وجاءت بأفكار مثالية ليس لها علاقة بالواقع. وقد تم في الأربع سنوات الماضية عدد ضخم من القتلى، وأيضا خسارة طاقات كبيرة. لذلك الناس تنتظر الآن نتائج الانتخابات القادمة، وتقديري بأن هذه الانتخابات سوف تفوز بها السيدة هيلاري كلينتون، وهي لها مواقف أكثر وضوحا في إطار الشرق الأوسط التي نرجو أن نجد هناك بعض المؤشرات من أجل وقوف الولايات المتحدة للدفاع عن مصالحها أولا ومصالح حلفائها في المنطقة.
شكرا دكتور محمد. رجاء تبقى معنا لأنه رح نرجع نسألك أسئلة وأجوبة ويكون عندك فرصة للمداخلة.
بكل سرور. بكل سرور.
شكرا. Now I would like to ask Dr. Riyad Tabbara to speak for 5 minutes. Before you do, the last time I remember Lebanese diplomacy made a major achievement in Washington when Ambassador Tabbara was the Lebanese ambassador in Washington, and I remember when he worked so hard to find a crack on the wall of the embargo that the United States imposed on Lebanon. And this is the time when Lebanese government was so irrelevant. This is under the Syrian occupation. And I remember the personal diplomacy of Dr. Riyad Tabbara managed to make a difference. So sometimes we hear if the whole government is irrelevant, you cannot do anything. And I think Dr. Riyad Tabbara is a living example that this is not the case. Personal diplomacy made a difference at the time. Dr. Riyad Tabbara, please, you have 5 minutes.
So much for the commercial. I'm reading the paper of Dr. Dunne. I felt that there is something basic to the elections in the United States that's missing, which is, I think Mr. Dr. Al-Rumaihi touched on it. Why this Trump phenomenon? What made the United States have a very strange elections, although they had strange elections before, and I could name a few, but this one really is the strangest election in the United States. And I think that is very, very important if you want to understand the intricacies of these elections. What is happening in the United States? I say that in the United States today, the white population, what is called in technical terms of the Census Bureau, the non-Hispanic white population, it means European mostly, and fortunately, the Lebanese are in this category of white population in the States. That population is losing control over the political system. And it's losing it very fast and has lost it in the last 2 elections. In the last election, 61% of the white population voted for Romney, but Obama made it. And this is the first time in the history of the United States that 61% of the whites vote for somebody and he doesn't make it. In 1950, 90% of the voters were white. Now, 62% of the voters are white. And if you look at the projections, the white population in the United States, as defined, will be a minority within a quarter century. So that has created, I think, a panic among some of the white population. The loss of political power. This is why I think Mr. Trump always talks about getting rid of 2 million Latinos. He wants to build a wall. He invited the European, he says, nice white people in Europe could come and take the citizenship. He is trying to go against history. History is going in one way. He's trying.
Just to go back to our discussion. I'm not saying you drifted away. What can a new president do that could affect Lebanon, in your view?
I think he could keep us under this umbrella, the security umbrella that we are under, and keep the protection until the crisis in the region is over. I don't think you can expect that the American government will intervene in the details of the life of Lebanon and who is elected for this or that. They never did that. I mean, when I was there, we had elections, presidential elections, when they extended for Mr. Harawi. And their attitude was really very global approach. They had veto on certain names, but anybody other than this, they really didn't care. So I don't think they will intervene in the details of the Lebanese situation unless that protection is threatened. That is, if the stability in Lebanon is threatened, they will interfere. But otherwise, I think it's just general blanket.
Dr. Tabbara, since you mentioned vetoes, I'm not going to intervene more. Are you talking about vetoes concerning candidates that are serious this election? The vetoes at the time when you were president. Can you say they had vetoes on whom?
I don't remember.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, do you have any more remarks to say about the subject?
That's what I want to introduce, the idea of why this these elections in the United States are so strange this time. I think there is, the basic ethnic structure of the United States is changing, and that is a reflection of it. That's what I want.
Thank you very much. Now, let's move to Mr. Sajad Jiyad. He is the president of the Bayan Center for Planning and Studies in Baghdad. من أم المعارك إلى أم المشاكل.
Thank you, Mouhamed. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to speak and before this prestigious audience and this wonderful venue. Coming from Baghdad yesterday, I was mindful that there isn't actually that much discussion about the US elections in Iraq. I think since the departure of President George W. Bush and since the Obama doctrine has become apparent to Iraqis, the relevance of American presidents has gone down in Iraq. I think for them, they understand that there will never be a president like W. Bush again, which means that they should not expect or wait for American engagement to increase again. And I think we can see with the battle against Daesh that American engagement is focused only on security. And despite the recommendations made by several former administration officials that America needs to engage beyond the security framework, unfortunately, we're not seeing that happening on the ground. And I don't think that will change. partly because for the Republicans, engaging in Iraq was a mistake. Whether the decision to go to war or what happened after the invasion, there was a mistake committed there. Worse, for the Democrats, it was a Republican mistake. So for the Republicans, they don't want to engage because they committed a mistake and they want to move on. And for the Democrats, they don't want to engage because it was a Republican mistake and even less reason for them to engage. I think Hillary Clinton, if elected president, will follow the Obama doctrine. I'm pretty sure she will only engage with Iraq on security issues. I think it's very unlikely that she will push for any engagement through civilian means or bureaucracy or aid programs or anything else beyond the security side of things. And if Donald Trump is elected president, I think there will be a complete withdrawal. I think he will go beyond the Obama doctrine. I think he will totally disengage the United States from Iraq. I think he believes, I know it was mentioned in the interview with Goldberg in The Atlantic with President Obama, the part where he mentions ancient hatreds and ancient rivalries in the Middle East. I think Donald Trump believes in that. Believes that the Middle East is always going to be at war, it's never going to be at peace, and American involvement will make things worse, it will not improve things. So for him, there's more reason for Americans to withdraw and focus their efforts internally or on countries that are very close to the United States. I think the recommendations put forward by Charles are very sensible, but if I am honest, I don't think they're practically going to see the light of day. I think American involvement will always focus on security first, and any other focus will be reduced, and I can't see that changing with either Hillary Clinton or with Donald Trump. Now, what do Iraqis want? I think they want America's capacity to improve the country. They want America to repair some of the mistakes in Iraq after 2003. They want to see American support, American companies, engagements with civil society. But I think they've come to understand that America is not a reliable ally. We see the same complaints in other countries. America has very limited strategic patience. It operates on a 2-year election cycle and a 4-year presidential cycle. So its policies are under review every 2 years. And they're concerned about their domestic audience. For Iraqis, this is not helpful. We need America that looks for a 30-year relationship, a 70-year relationship. Sometimes I hear the comparison made with America's relationship with Saudi Arabia. It's been consistent for over 70 years, 80 years, 90 years. Why is the United States not able to have such a strategic partnership with other Arab countries, and particularly Iraq? Why is their relationship limited to 5-year cycles or 10-year cycles? So that's always something that people look at and say this is a weakness in the United States, that it has very limited patience to engage with a complex country like Iraq. So on this basis, I think there's going to be more room for involvement for other countries, whether invited or uninvited. So with Turkey, for example, it's an uninvited invitation, and they're attempting to influence the country because they see the possibility that America will not be as engaged going forward once Daesh is defeated. And for Russia and China, it will probably be an invited intervention, an invited engagement. And this is going to leave America squeezed out more than it has been so far. And of course, the other players like Iran and Saudi Arabia, they've realized that America will not go back to the time of George W. Bush. Whoever becomes president after Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump will follow in the likely footsteps and likely policy decisions, and we won't see any changes on that. I think it will be a long time before we see a president like George W. Bush again. So I'd like to end it there, and I think Charles's recommendations are very good on a theoretical level, but practically I'm not sure we'll see that much change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sajad. Now I ask Khaled Yacoub Oweis, he's a visiting fellow at the German Institute for Security International Affairs in Berlin. Please, you have your 5 minutes.
Well, thank you for the privilege of being in Mount Lebanon. I mean, this is a region where it's etched in one's memory if you're from the Middle East, because it's the heart of the Arab Renaissance. But also, whenever I'm in Mount Lebanon, I make sure to visit the beautiful Jiyad cemetery and remember that these conflicts cost lives. And looking at Syria, you have to ask whose lives it is. And I think this is what's been missing in the US policy. The massacres of the Russian and Syrian Air Force are targeting Syria's majority Sunnis. And nobody is talking about them, especially in the United States. The United States, in very stark terms under Obama, I think when I was in the States, in the Kosovo, Yugoslavia, named names and moved when there was ethnic massacres and called them by name. Now nobody talks about them. And what we are seeing in Syria is the second genocide. There was one genocide against the Sunni, whatever you want to call it, genocide, ethnic cleansing, depopulation that happened in the 1980s, and Hafez al-Assad got away with it. And now Bashar al-Assad with his allies are getting away with it. But the main weakness of the United States is going back, to my view, not to the Obama doctrine. And Obama didn't go back to the long telegram to shape US policy. I think he went back to Kissinger. And Kissinger's policy, part of it, was an alliance of minorities in the Middle East. And this is what the United States is practically doing. It allied with the Kurds. So we have a de facto zone in the Kurdish region. American planes kept away the Syrian regime planes when it wanted to give the PKK and PYD a slap on the wrist. Even the United States did not allow the Assad Air Force to give the Kurds a tiny slap on the wrist. And that was de facto no-fly zone and de facto, and the same de-fly zone that the Americans is arguing that it doesn't want to give the Sunnis of Syria. So the Sunnis looking at this, it's easy to see that Daesh and the Nusra Front are right. The United States, in their view, and in many of the view of the anti-Assad Sunni Syrians, is ganging up with Iran, with the PKK, and even with Russia, and I'm talking, this is the view, to snuff out Syrian Sunnis. And these brigades in Aleppo, they don't like Nusra Front, and Nusra Front is not in Aleppo. Nusra Front has very limited presence in Syrian cities or Daesh, let's say in what's called the Green Syria, Aleppo, Homs, Damascus, and Daraa. Nusra Front is basically not there in the cities, yet the regime has made a point of destroying the majority Sunni cities and inflaming the Sunni sentiment, which have no ally in the United States. The United States have not lifted a finger to help Syria's Sunnis. It's back to the Kissinger doctrine of alliance of minorities. I think this will have repercussions. I mean, as far as terrorism, anti-terrorism, people are not stupid. I live in Germany, and I'm surprised that you have 1 million Syrian refugees in Germany, mostly Sunnis, mostly driven by Assad's indiscriminate bombardment. And I find it really fascinating that not more Syrians tried to blow them up in Germany, saying that nobody in the West is lifting a finger for them. But whenever a make-up Kurdish woman appears in some obscure Kurdish town, they send American warplanes to protect them. So I don't want to run too much, but and the United States, not only that, it did made political steps to harm the Syrian Sunnis who rose up against Assad. For example, the United States intervened and vetoed to make sure that there wouldn't be a Syrian provisional government. And the Syrian National Coalition brought up this government despite the United States, and there was years of vacuum in delivering services where areas have gone out of Assad's control. But the United States was vehement to oppose the Syrian provisional government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we conclude our first section of today's program about this subject. Let's take a 15 minutes break and let's reconvene, please, at 11:15 sharp. Thank you very much.